Welcome to the Euranet Plus Summit, where we are joined by European Commission Vice President Věra Jourová, in charge of values and transparency. Vice President, thank you very much for being with us here today.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
So, my name is Ella Joyner. I'm a reporter here in Brussels, and I'm thrilled to steward what will be a wide-ranging discussion because we also have journalists from 7 different European radio stations dialing in live. Some are national, some regional and some local, but all are members of the Euranet Plus network, striving to inform their listeners about European politics and policy. So hello to Lydia in Slovenia. Richards.
Hi.
Hello Lydia. Richards in Latvia. Richards?
Hi, hello.
Hello. Gigi in Italy.
Buongiorno.
Buongiorno. Florin in Romania.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Florin. Aniek in Belgium.
Hello.
Hi. Mart in Estonia. Do we have Mart?
Hello.
Great.
Hello.
And Amelie in Germany.
Hello.
Hi, Amelie. So we will cover a lot of ground in the next 30 minutes. So let's dive in. Vice President, your portfolio spans many contentious topics: the rule of law, European democracy, and media freedom, to name just a few. You've also been involved in a push to tighten regulation on platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and of course X, formerly known as Twitter. One major issue here being disinformation, something which you've brought up frequently. So X has just raised the possibility of introducing a paywall so that users would have to subscribe and pay to use their services. Do you think that would help solve X's disinformation policy? The idea is that it will help stamp out bots, essentially. And so I'm wondering whether you think that this is a good idea to tackle disinformation.
Let me, first of all, greetings to all the various places. Thank you for your interest. On your question, first of all, it's the business decision of X, of Mr. Musk, so I'm not here to make any evaluation on his decisions regarding the way he operates on the market. But whether to have the service paid might decrease the appearance and intensity of disinformation, I am not sure, because it would mean that would it mean, let me speculate a bit, would it mean that if the people pay for the network, they might have a stronger say that they do not want to be surrounded by hate speech, manipulative content, the messages which have the potential to radicalize people, or the classical disinformation? I don't know, maybe. But we will be, of course, watching the space. Whether paid or not, X will have to comply with the new European rules.
Yes, and I think that is the next obvious question, is whether or not you think that paywall might work. Is X doing enough right now in order to tackle disinformation, in your view?
Twitter was doing so well with us because the code of practice against disinformation was and still is a kind of voluntary agreement. Rather demanding endeavor for the platforms, because we want them to hire the fact checkers and get the facts right in their space. And we were working so well several years with the experts of Twitter. So I was also personally sorry that Twitter decided to leave the code of practice, because it was also the opportunity to have a very open discussion platform on what's feasible in the world of technologies. And so Twitter is now missing. It's not an obligation to be part of the code, but it's the obligation, and I already said it, to comply with the legally binding rules, which is Digital Services Act. And there I cannot still judge how Twitter is going, or X, how they are complying, because we are at the very beginning of the journey.
Okay, so seems to me like you're not entirely convinced by Twitter's efforts, perhaps. But anyway, I think for now we'll pivot to the closely related topic of media freedom, for which I'm going to bring in Lydia, our colleague from Slovenia. Lydia, over to you.
Thank you. Hello once again. Vice President, in early September, the European Parliament's Culture and Education Committee voted on the European Media Freedom Act, as you know, set to bring new rules to promote media pluralism and independence. My question, how far are we from the media across the European Union being properly, legally regulated? And is that even feasible, considering the vast differences of our media and cultural landscapes? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, how far we are from the moment when the media will be regulated, I hope we are not going in that direction. By the Media Freedom Act, I want to regulate the space for media and create the conditions for the media so that the journalist can do freely the job without fear of being spied or punished by the state for not being willing to disclose the information sources. We want the media to be also more resilient when it comes to political pressures and so on. Your question is, I think, about how far we are in the direction of adoption. I hope that we might have good dialogue with the member states and with the parliament. There are still several things to be discussed thoroughly where the parliament and the member states seem to have very different ideas and views. And it's always the task for the Commission to play the role of the honest broker. And I can tell you, in such situations, in these so-called trialogues, I am always happy when the final result resembles and is very close to the original Commission proposal, which might be also this case, but I will see.
Okay. Well, I think we'll now get into what has probably been the fieriest parts of your portfolio, the rule of law. So I will quickly hand over to Richard from Latvian Radio. Hi, Richard.
Yes, hi. Once again, greetings from Latvia. During her State of the Union speech, Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said that the rule of law reports will now be extended to accession member states. How is it going to work? And what about the added value of existing accession reports?
Yes, there will be two parallel tracks. I have to say I appreciate this idea. I find it feasible and useful. The two tracks are, of course, the classical negotiations. There are two chapters which the accession countries have to negotiate, and they are mainly about justice system, anti-corruption, fight against organized crime, also media. And this second strand, I think that the accession countries like Serbia or Ukraine, they might appreciate that we will use the same methodology for assessing the situation in the rule of law sphere in our member states, and that we will use the same method to assess the situation in accession countries, because I think that some of them are really trying hard to introduce the reforms of judiciary, for instance, the reforms which will be sustainable and which will deliver or strengthen the system, which will be robust enough and which will survive the next elections. And so I think that this additional assessment of the accession countries will be welcomed, and we will be able to do it already in the next year rule of law report.
And I think there was one part of Richard's question which you haven't quite addressed, if I can push you.
Okay.
He asked, what about the added value of the existing accession reports? I guess the question is, if you also have these rule of law reports, you know, how do these two work together?
Yes, thank you for this question. Sorry, I forgot to answer. The added value, well, some used to say that this is just another paper for never-ending discussion. It's not it proved not to be the case, because we have very objective and thorough analysis of the situation in each member state. We are working on it together with the member states, so it's nothing like a cabinet kind of secret thing done in Brussels and then something which surprises the member states. No, we do it together, and the added value is objective assessment, comparison of the situation in the member states, the possibility to get inspiration from another member state, and we are adding also recommendations, where I see big added value as the recommendations opening the dialogue with the member states on concrete things, because you can speak about rule of law principle hours and hours, use nice phrases, fantastic or not, depends on the situation. But the rule of law report is giving a very structured message about the situation. And then when I go to a member state, to the parliament, to Minister of Justice, to the Minister of Culture, speak about media. When I speak in the member states with the civil society or with the media, we have the topic well framed.
So it sort of sets out a common script for you to address.
Very concrete and fair. It's a fair exercise because we use the same methodology for all the member states, the same channels of information, same assessment of data.
Okay. Well, we'll stay on this topic for now, and I'm going to bring in Gigi from Radio 24 in Milan. Gigi, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Well, I think we can stay very on solid ground. And so my question would be this one. In a new and not entirely uncontroversial development, the European Commission has tied the disbursement of money from the European Union Resilience and Recovery Facility to compliance with what it sees as the rule of law. Brussels used this new tool as a leverage against, we might say, Poland and Hungary. The question is, so what result have you achieved on this front, and how could this become a permanent binding instrument to be built, given that the RRF is just a temporary instrument? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and buongiorno to Milan. We are setting the criteria and conditions for the recovery money according to the country-specific recommendations. Sorry to be so technical, but there was no surprise for neither Poland nor Hungary that we set the criteria as we did it, and the criteria were mainly in the field of judiciary system and the protection of EU funding. So no surprise for Poland. You ask about the results. So Poland has adopted the law in the parliament, which had the good potential to solve the problem, not all the problems in judiciary in Poland, but part of the problem. And now, based on the request of President Duda, this law appears in the Constitutional Tribunal. So the law is waiting for the ruling of the Constitutional Tribunal. After that, we might come back to the possibility of providing Poland with the money. Similar situation in Hungary. Hungary is introducing reforms into their judiciary bodies, and we are monitoring the process, and we have very permanent and intense discussion with Hungary when we explain to Hungary what we want, and Hungary is explaining what they are doing and how it will work in practice, whether it won't be only on paper or whether we can expect the real change. So these talks are ongoing. So after this process will be finalized, we can provide the funding.
Yeah. Gigi, do you have a follow-up to that? I sense you may have a follow-up.
Follow-up, if I may, is to understand. So do you think, President Jourova, this is the way to go forward. I mean, to connect the common public European money to maybe few but very clear rules on this field.
Well, yes, clear rules in this field are quite difficult to have, because it's not a policy where we can be very precise, concrete, where we can quantify the results. But still, I believe we have very clear rules, also the very clear rulings from the European Court of Justice on what rule of law principle means. When we were discussing on how to push Poland and Hungary to introduce changes in their system, we were also pushed ourselves by the European taxpayers and also European businesses, because they are telling me it's rather difficult to do business in a country where we cannot rely on independence of the court. So we are ourselves under big push, and our obligation is to protect the European taxpayers' money. That's why we enriched our toolbox with this financial pressure, if I can simplify that. But again, this is the opportunity for mutual dialogue and on doing something together.
So if I can just push you a little bit, so do you think this is going to be a kind of tool that you're going to keep in the European Commission toolbox going forward, that you would replicate this kind of structure in future, where you would kind of you'd link EU funds with compliance? It's
settled already in the legislation, because we have the so-called conditionality regulation. Yeah. It's set in stone. Of course, in the future there might be changes, but at this moment, no money without the certainty that the money will be protected in a country. The recovery funding, it's one-off. Yeah, so we have to also see that while the conditionality, which covers mainly the cohesion money, is a stable structure, the conditions for the recovery money is one-off.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we'll take one last question on the rule of law, although this time from a slightly different angle. Florin from Romania. Hi, Florin.
Hello again.
Hi.
Madam Vice President, 10 days ago, the European Commission has finalized the cooperation and verification mechanism process for Romania and Bulgaria, a process meant to monitor progress on the performance and transparency of the judicial system, fight against corruption, and so on. And also in her speech on the State of the Union, President von der Leyen called on bringing us in the Schengen area without any further delay. But Austria is still vetoing our accession to Schengen. What are we supposed to do now? Thank you.
My personal view is that it was high time that we finalize the cooperation and verification mechanism for Romania, and that we transfer the remaining things to be done under the rule of law annual report. So this is what happened with the so-called CVM. For Schengen, I thought that it's also high time that we invite Romania and Bulgaria in Schengen, that there is no need to wait more. And I think that also for the feeling of the citizens in both countries, it's important step forward that they do not feel that they are somehow discriminated or I don't know, put aside. And Ursula von der Leyen said it clearly. You asked about Austria. My advice to Romanian ministers and ambassador, and in all the discussions I have with the Romanian representatives, my advice is intensify your bilateral diplomatic effort to convince especially the member states which have some doubts that they should drop their doubts. And the arguments of Austria were the lack of effort being invested by Romania in migration. I think that Romania has a lot to say to Austria, that Austria should drop the veto. So I do hope, as Věra Jourová, my personal hope is that we will see this done by the end of the year.
Mm-hmm. And would you also personally push Austria in your position?
It's not my business. Of course, you can do things sitting around official table, and you can do things while drinking coffee. So I will try to help. Maybe good advice. Thank you.
So, Vice President, I think if there's one event that has cast a shadow over the integrity of EU institutions during your this mandate, it has to be Qatargate. So I'm going to turn over to my colleague Annick in Belgium from Belgian broadcaster RTBF. Annick, over to you.
Yes, good afternoon, Mrs. Jourová. The European Parliament has recently adopted new rules on ethics and transparency after the Qatargate scandal. Do you think these new rules go far enough? There are, for example, those new rules about the transparency register. Do you think this will really be sufficient to prevent future corruption in the EU?
No, and they cannot prevent corruption fully, because there is every time the personal integrity of the member of the parliament, and this is, in my view, the decisive thing. But on your question, it's good that the parliament adopted the rules. Also, already was good the Roberta Metzola's quick reaction on the Qatargate. But I want to work further with the parliament to make stronger rules, both for transparency register, but also for access to documents. I want to work with the Parliament on highest possible ethical standards, which should be supervised by the European ethics body. We all have to do much more. And I know that the Qatargate concerned mainly the members of the European Parliament, but the people do not recognize the difference. Whether it's Parliament or Commission or whoever in Brussels, the people will always say there is something rotten in Brussels. They have high salaries and they misbehave for our money. So I think that it's our common obligation to do more. But coming back to your question, I appreciate that the Parliament moved in the right direction. Because, of course, we are already at the start of the political campaign before the elections. And if something is discouraging people from going to elections or voting those who might have dangerous solutions, is that they are upset about the abuse of power, undeserved privileges, corruption, and wrong communication. So I think that it's high time that the Parliament came with some solution.
So you clearly see some room for improvements. Annick, I sense that you may have a follow-up to that question.
Yes, Mrs. Jourová, you just mentioned the creation of an independent ethics body common to all EU institutions. This is something you proposed a few months ago, but nothing really happened. And also the proposal from the Commission was a body but without any power to investigate or to sanction. Why is it so difficult to make a real breakthrough?
Maybe we are not transparent enough. The reason why, the fact that you do not hear anything about it doesn't mean that nothing is happening. We are working on technical level. At this moment, we will have the second political meeting at the beginning of November. I hope that, because it's not easy to get 9 institutions around one table represented by high people. And I don't agree that the ethics body, how the Commission proposed it, has no teeth or no power. It should be a very strong body setting the high standards, which will have to be respected and fully implemented by all the 9 institutions. And I believe that also the the possibility of the institutions under ethics body to react on a lack of action from some of the institutions and to bring such institution to the court, it's already something. We want all the institutions to respect and implement in full the high standards. And I think that it might be a game changer. Of course, the ethics body cannot investigate individual cases and it cannot penalize people. First of all, we would have to create a monstrous big office dealing with thousands of cases. Only for the Commission in 2020, I think it was 5,000 disciplinary cases. Just imagine, yeah, the scope. And also, the ethics body does not have any legal basis. It's not established on the basis of the precise text in the treaty. It should be interinstitutional agreement. And it's too weak for possible sanctioning of people. I cannot imagine we would go that far.
Okay. Well, you already mentioned European elections, which is, of course, on everyone's brain here in Brussels now. And I think for our next question, we'll look a little bit more to the future. And for that, I'm going to bring in Mart from Kuku in Estonia. Mart, over to you.
Yeah, hello.
Hello.
I actually have the very similar question, and I like that you already raised the problem in one of your previous answers. And the question is, we are going to EU elections, and the citizens in Europe don't differentiate between different bodies, different power in Brussels. For them, it's really transparency is a kind of problem in Brussels, and that makes them not so willing to vote on, let's say, EU elections, an example. So my question is actually, what is being done in the EU level to make European citizens more interested in the European politics? And as you have been in the European politics for a while now, what do you think Europe can do better?
Well, we try hard, and I speak on behalf of the Commission, to present the EU through the facts, so no empty propaganda, but the facts, that EU is useful for people. And some things are easy to explain, some not. I worked in consumers policy. It was quite easy to explain that we are really trying hard to guarantee that they will only buy safe products. It's less easy to sell, for instance, the rule of law as something which we work on. But nobody and nothing, I think, gave this message that EU is useful as it happened in case of COVID and Russian war. Because I think that in COVID, the vaccination, the passport which the people could use, which was developed by the EU, the fact that in COVID time the people did not notice any obstacles on the common market. The supply chains were not interrupted, and it was not automatic. It was a hard work of many people working in EU institutions to keep the lanes free. And I can tell you, without that, in Czechia we would only eat cabbage and potatoes. But the people did not realize that something is happening with the market, and it was the work of many working on European level. So these are the things we have to remind the people of and explain. Russian war, Russian aggression against Ukraine, and energy crisis, many connected things with it. I think that the people realize that, especially the people living in our countries, and you are from Estonia, yeah? So from that part of Europe, we realize that if we are not, or would not be in EU and NATO, Putin's imperialistic appetite would really want to swallow us again. Now we are too big bite for him to swallow. So I think that these two crises also made it clearer to people why they should appreciate the EU, but a lot of other things have to be explained and done.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question is, in your view, these crises have helped show the added value of the EU to ordinary EU citizens, but have you really seen have you seen a shift in opinion in public polls as we go towards elections? Is this wishful thinking, or is this actually borne out in kind of hard data of how Europeans feel about?
We saw better data of appreciation of the EU in the second year of COVID and after the invasion. We saw the peaks, but then, of course, with the energy prices and inflation and uncertainty, the trust in the EU, which is, however, very similar to decline of trust in the democratic institutions in general. So declining trust, it is a very, very strong factor which we see everywhere in Europe now, almost everywhere.
So do you think that the Commission did enough on the energy crisis if that hasn't translated into kind of respect for the European Commission's work in the way that these other crises did?
I think the energy is a good story. We are ahead of the second difficult winter, so but still I dare to say that we managed very well two things: get rid to a large extent of the Russian energy sources. Putin's petrol station now cannot sell to Europe, and it has been minimized. And the second thing, that the people were able to heat, not to suffer. And I think that it was also an eye-opening moment that they saw that indeed the EU and the member states, the democratically elected representatives, work for them. Because it might have been very easy that if this fails, then the people would feel it very badly on their own skin.
Okay. We'll now we'll now pivot quickly to our final topic. Vice President, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you personally signed the Istanbul Convention back in 2017 when you were Justice Minister. That's correct?
Yes.
Okay. Because I now have a colleague who wants to ask you about just that. Amelie from Germany, over to you.
The EU has now ratified the Istanbul Convention tackling violence against women, even though some member states have still not ratified. Bulgaria, Czechia, Hungary, Latvia, Lithuania, and Slovakia. What can the European Commission do to convince those who are skeptical and argue it's ideologically driven? And do you plan to push those who haven't ratified yet?
Well, yeah, we ratified, we joined as the EU, but to the extent of our competencies. Sorry, I am a lawyer, so I don't want to bore you. But we did on European level what we had to do. It's true, however, that the main things, the main benefit stemming from the Istanbul Convention, which means better protection of women, better protection of those who might fall victims of domestic violence, the main thing should be done at the member state level. And here you are right, there was a clash or crash, or how we can call it, with the conservative powers in several member states, conservative forces which are delivering alarmist news and ideas about how the Istanbul Convention might be interpreted in the future. And whenever I hear them referring to the traditional family, I am really upset, because if this should belong to good European traditions, that the women are beaten at home, then we should really get rid of such a tradition. You ask how the Commission can push the member states. Well, we can try, and we are trying to convince, to support also the civil society and awareness raising of the citizens, but we cannot push the political representation directly. We don't have any tool. So it's rather a dialogue and I tried a lot when I was in Bulgaria and Croatia. In Slovakia, I met the representatives of the Catholic and Orthodox Church. It's not very traditional that the commissioners directly ask for meetings with the religious, the representatives of the religions. And I really wanted to understand what's wrong. Why the churches, the Christians, do not want to protect the women and children more. And the reference to traditional family, which as it is displayed in the Bible, well, I didn't have much to say. Yeah? It was very, very strong position, and it was obvious that this position of the church will still, for some time, be influencing the public opinion.
Okay. If I may, I will just ask you one final question from me about something a little different, since you've now assumed responsibility for AI regulation. So a coalition of NGOs has just called for an outright ban on the use of all facial recognition technology in public space and in contexts of migration or asylum. So when, in your view, is facial recognition in public space justified?
My view is very well reflected in what the Commission proposed 2 years ago, where we said very clearly this kind of technology is extremely dangerous, especially in the wrong hands. And we allowed in the legislation the use of this kind of technology, especially the facial recognition in real time, only in very exceptional cases or situations, like when a child has been kidnapped or disappeared, or missing child, simply said, or the preparation of terrorist attack and these kind of situations. It's true that we see that more and more the criminals and really dangerous gangs and people are using technologies against security. So we cannot, we cannot make it impossible for those who have to guarantee security, which is member state and law enforcement sector. We cannot just ban the usage of such technologies, absolutely. But at the same time, and this is where I am on the side of the civil society, we have to be extremely careful, because the abuse of such technology could come very easily.
And do you think it's appropriate to use such technology at EU borders or in a migration context?
I told you, we proposed just very narrow space to allow this to be used. In migration context, I don't think it's there, because I think that we limited it to these two situations: missing children and serious crime endangering lives of people, which, in my view, is not the situation of migrants. So once again, the technology can be very well used for a good thing, but the abuse might be very, very also easy and simple. That's why we are now pushing on having the rules already in force.
Vice President, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today at the Euranet Plus Summit. It's been a great discussion that should now reach Europeans listening all over the continent. Until next time.
And now I started to fear only. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
Have a good day.